Ladies and gentlemen, it has finally happened. Bitcoin just hit $60,000. I expected to make this video probably somewhere very much closer to the Bitcoin halving on the one end. And on the opposite, as you can see from the chart I'm showing you right here, we described already that there's a very good chance the moment that Bitcoin breaks 45,000, that is going to be a very quick rise to roughly 60. With again, the moment it hits 45, a fake out, and then the moment it comes back to 45, a break of 60. It happened an initial time here in February of 2021, then later in, let's say, August of 2021. And right now, we saw a little fake out here in January. And right now, after breaking 45 for the second time, it was an instant massive crush of 60,000. Right now, sitting at $60.5 thousand per Bitcoin. And all I can say is, guys, many of you have been asking for a trading update, but like I said before, I just have some of the long positions open, and you can find my bot in here still. You can see it's just been steady growth throughout. And that's my main strategy. This is since I published how to go for it. Since day one, it's literally been only up. And I mean, a little bit earlier, we were looking at the 0.382 Fibonacci here, because that was obviously a very important level to cross, or turn around, people might understand a little bit easier, the 0.618, and basically the 0.786, because in the previous cycle, the moment that this level was crossed, the Bitcoin bull run basically started, and things started going crazy from this break on forward. And if you remember the last video we've made, we talked about the final blockage. Let me just quickly take this arrow out the way. We said that basically everything at $50,000 here is the final area where we have massive resistances for Bitcoin, all the way until the fake high points, which we reached just now. This is again an area where we might see a little ruckus. Things might get a little rough, but generally speaking, if we understand the idea that BlackRock and all the other ETF providers are heavily buying right now, plus the fact that the halving is coming up in roughly a month and a half or so from now, it doesn't make sense to not remain bullish throughout the duration here. And before we move on with all the rest of the info, I just want to quickly say that whatever happened to Bitcoin here, I think it's very interesting that we take into consideration just how massive the lead up was to the Bitcoin ETF approval window, how interesting the dump was quickly afterwards, and after filling the CME gap, how quickly prices rose upwards, because this might very well soon replicate itself almost to the fullest with Ethereum. And so all the gains we're seeing right now, they're just one part of the bigger story. There was only something interesting, I guess, yesterday. We did notice that the Bitcoin price went up quite drastically, while the RSI actually angled down. Bearish divergence, usually not too nice, but you have to understand that in bull markets, things like this will happen all the time, where some traders will find a signal to think, oh, this is where Bitcoin turns back around, and it just keeps blasting through. Because it also seems like Bitcoin's bull flag here is playing out quite nicely, and I think the target for that should be roughly $63,000. And so if you see those very, very short-term bearish plays, because this is a 4-hour, the other one was a 1-hour, I'd stick to the bullish scenario, because that's the narrative. That's what the market's in right now. And I've noticed over the past couple of days, the people keep wondering more and more about the average funding rate and how crazy high it is getting. But when I look back at previous bull runs, you can see that the number's not even on the charts here anymore. And we can see that the numbers got really crazy November of 2020 here, the aggregate funding rate average, right? You can see how crazy it has been ever since that point, and it remained crazy throughout the entire duration of this bullish push. Came back down, and historically speaking, these areas where the funding rate goes down so significantly, basically negative really, is where are good opportunities to go long again, because afterwards for this second run up, you can see we had some spikes, but not the massive euphoria and craze that we noticed before. But relatively right now, yes, we are seeing some similar heights as with the actual Bitcoin all-time high, but relatively to the runner-up of that, we have not really seen anything just quite yet. I'd more so compare it to the excitement that we saw here early in 2020, I'd say somewhere around the August ballpark, where yes, there were some spikes and it was quite exciting, but not full-on crazy euphoria just quite yet. And if you're wondering, funding rates are basically the cost of borrowing. Let's say you want to open a long position. Well, since you are basically borrowing money, there's a cost to that you have to pay every 8 hours. The higher this percentage is, the more it costs to go long now, because additional people are all trying to do the same thing. If it's very positive, it means most people are trying to go long, And so you are paying to also borrow additional money to go along with. If the funding rate is negative, theoretically speaking, most people are trying to short. And so if you're opening a long position, instead of having to pay for that, you are getting paid for that because you're basically being the counterweight to what most people are trying to do. So instead of you paying money, you're now getting money. And that's actually a fun thing about shorting in bull markets. If you were to short right now, for example, as the funding rate's high, you will be paid for doing so. However, you then must hope that the price at some point comes back to your entry and it doesn't keep going higher, because most of the time your payment, let's say this 0.04, is not going to cover the losses that you'll make from the price moving, but sometimes it can. Anyway, having said that, I find it really odd that we're only like 10% away, 15% away or so from a new Bitcoin all-time high. It just feels like it should have been taken a lot longer. And you can see just how quickly prices are moving right now as people are all across the board. There's massive euphoria, at least that phase is starting. At the end of the day, it's the euphoria. It's been around for a little while because the prices just keep going crazier and crazier. Where people expect things to stop, it just keeps breaking higher and higher. Now, I want to refer back to the previous bull market where also we had similar sort of thoughts where at any single one of these candles, people most likely thought, oh, you see, that's too much gains. And here we saw let's quickly check this out. We saw a roughly 32 or so % correction where a lot of people most likely gave up, which again could happen right now. A 32% correction would bring us towards the $41,000 mark or so, which again happened in the runner-up towards a new all-time high, which actually corrected afterwards with roughly 56% or so before breaking even higher. Point being here, don't let the price on the short term and any correction of sorts completely fool you that no, we're not going higher for Bitcoin. We are, at least as far as I'm concerned. It just might be a little bit bumpier than you expect, but relatively, I think still, guys, that whatever we've seen in the past, right, will basically replicate itself yet again, with this time around Bitcoin hitting crazier heights, in my opinion, above $100,000 for sure, perhaps even way higher. It just kind of depends on how crazy the ETFs are going to remain. I would not be too surprised if Bitcoin's chart eventually looked like this. And sometimes it's just crazy to look back at previous charts where we're talking about, oh, look, it's been 294 days since Bitcoin crossed this level. I made this video back in March of 2023 when Bitcoin is roughly $28,000. And it's crazy to see that right now we've more than doubled that price already. And it's actually been what? Let's quickly take a look. It's been roughly, let's see here, 833 days since Bitcoin hit these prices that we are witnessing right now. And so, in my opinion, there's nothing really stopping us anymore. One thing that is also interesting, though, I'll quickly point you guys out for right now, is that there is some massive liquidations that would happen if Bitcoin were to go back to roughly 50.5K. You can see it's getting towards the $2.5 billion mark. And there's really not that much keeping Bitcoin so high afloat. So we could see a little flush out on the short term, whereas 50.5 though seems like one of the strongest bases, as again, $2.5 or so billion will probably get wrecked as we get towards that area, with afterwards our massive next support being 42,000 or so. And you're starting to notice as well that the gaps start getting bigger and bigger, because usually in big bull markets, the moves also get significantly bigger every single day. And to put it into perspective one more time, every single time Bitcoin gets these all-time high levels, it's a pretty quick crush of the prices afterwards. Right now, we've gotten to those prices. You can just see how it's performed in the history, right? After this, things have only gotten crazier, not worse. And over the last couple of weeks, I've shown you multiple times the stock, so the S&P making an all-time high effects on Bitcoin, that roughly after the S&P makes an all-time high, which it did, what, 2 months ago, Bitcoin makes an all-time high roughly a year later. Yeah, that's still set. But right now, we are expected Bitcoin to make a new all-time high in roughly, well, the new all-time high would be 70,000, right? I'm talking the top for Bitcoin being in roughly a year. Then again, if we just take a look at this cycle here, honestly, guys, we are not even that far in. We're not even in that amazing of a position right now because the halving has not even happened. So the craziest gains, they've not occurred because usually there's a runner-up in front of the halving, but afterwards, like you can see from the curve here, is where things get crazy, and that's still what I'm anticipating. Again, every single time, it just works the same way, like clockwork. And I find it odd that people are not willing to accept that the bull run has started and things will only keep getting crazier. Yeah, you know what? That's about my message. Hopefully, you guys are getting excited. If you also want to follow along my trading strategies, I've got a couple of links down below to the exchanges that I personally use. The bots are over on OKX. leave the link down below too. If you want to trade without KYC, all you got to use is a VPN. I've got a link to NordVPN down below. You can use Deepcoin. I'll leave a link as well. Yeah, that's about it.